Okay, so a lot of people will have the right general idea in terms of what it takes to solve an equation like this, but they actually won't be able to solve the equation because they can't handle or they're not going to be able to manage all the necessary steps correctly. So there's a big difference between kind of having a general idea on how to solve, let's say, an equation in algebra and actually doing it. But let's see how well you do with this problem. And the equation is 5m times m plus 1 is equal to m minus 2 times m minus 1. Of course, we want to solve for the variable m. All right, so that is the problem. Feel free to use a calculator, but if you can figure this out, go ahead and put your answer into the comment section. I'll show you the correct answer in just 1 second. Then, of course, I'll walk through all the steps that are necessary to solve this equation. Matter of fact, there is a decent amount of work here, so you definitely don't want to rush through this problem. But before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John, and I have been teaching middle and high school math for decades. And if you need help learning math, well, check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, or if you just enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the equation one more time. 5m times m plus 1 is equal to m minus 2 times m minus 1. Let's go ahead and just quickly define what type of equation this is. Now, even if you didn't get the answer to this equation right, and you knew that, you know what, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I think this is a quadratic equation. Well, that is very good. At least you had kind of identified that we're dealing with quadratic equations, and indeed we are. And let's go ahead and take a look at the correct answer. The correct answer is the following. So x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 2. Now, it's possible some of you had kind of like an equivalent answer, but an unsimplified answer. In other words, it's correct, but it's not fully simplified. And really, an answer that is not fully simplified is really not correct. So in math, we don't like to write our answers like, let's say, like this, like a fraction, 100 over 200. Yes, we all know that that is equal to the fraction 1/2. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I just like to write my fractions without reducing them or simplify them. Well, that, and from a mathematics standpoint, this would be considered like an incorrect answer. Okay, your teacher's not going to like it. And in terms of test or quizzes or multiple choice exams, for this particular equation, this would be the answer you would have to recognize. So always, always, always simplify your work, assuming, of course, you know how to. Now, again, it's possible a lot of you were on the right track. So this problem has a lot of steps. So we're going from point A to point B, and there's different phases of this problem. So it's possible some of you, kind of made it through a good amount of the problem, and then something kind of tripped you up, which caused you to get the wrong answer. So don't get discouraged if you didn't get this right, because it's possible you did a lot of good work. But if you did do this correct, well, that is fantastic. I have to give you a nice little happy face, an A++, a 200%. Matter of fact, if you were in my algebra class, I would say take the rest of the year off. I have no idea how you're doing so good in algebra. Maybe you've been watching that guy on YouTube teach. But all jokes aside, if you were able to get this right, that is actually very good. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this right now. And I'm going to go ahead and forewarn you that I'm going to be doing a lot of steps here. Now, I'll kind of generally explain as we go through the equation what's going on, but this would turn into a very, very long video if I had to kind of break down every single aspect of this problem. I am going to be using the quadratic formula here. So if you need help with quadratic equations, quadratic formula, anything in this problem, check out my main courses. You'll find links to those in the description of this video, which include, the best course for the material that we're covering here would be Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. Now, if you happen to be at a higher level of math, like pre-calculus, I teach this stuff in there as well. But what we're talking about here, or what this type of equation, is typically not something that somebody in like a pre-algebra course would cover. So don't typically study quadratic equations in pre-algebra. But anyways, if you don't understand something, make note of that and get help, get the help that you need. All right, so with all that being said, let me go ahead and start going through this equation step by step. All right, so the first thing we want to do is use the distributive property over here on the left-hand side, and we want to multiply on the right-hand side. So we have some multiplication we have to do. So we have 5m times m times 1, so that's going to give us 5m squared plus 5m. Again, this is the distributive property. And then we have m minus 2 times m minus 1. Here we can use the FOIL technique, first, outer, inner, last. So first, outer, inner, last. And when I do all that, I'm going to end up with this trinomial right here. So we have 5m squared plus 5m is equal to m squared minus m minus 2m plus 2. Now, of course, right here, I could combine these like terms. So negative 1m plus a negative 2m gives me a negative 3m. And so this is what we have right here. Now, when you're doing this work, what you want to do is, let's suppose you take this step right here. You don't want to continue on until you take a quick glance and kind of grade yourself, audit yourself. You're like, wait, did I make any mistakes? Double check and triple check. This is how you kind of prevent yourself from making errors as you go through a problem. It's so easy to write something wrong. That's going to happen. The key is you need to catch an error before you finish the problem, right? So there's no big deal in making an error as long as you, identify it. And that's why you want to use pencil and not pen, because you do a lot of erasing in math. Okay, so at this point we have all this, quadratic terms, or we have a squared term and a linear term. In other words, we have m squared and m and a number. So we need to be thinking in terms of, all right, this is a quadratic equation because it's the highest power of this variable is 2. This is a second degree polynomial. So how do we solve quadratic equations? Well, this is a huge topic in and of itself. And again, it goes beyond the full scope of this video because there's various methods involved. But typically, when you have a linear term, in other words, in other words, if we have an m squared, sometimes you have equations without that middle variable. In other words, you might just have 5m squared is equal to 30, and there's no m term, okay, no variable to the first power involved, or a linear term. So these type of quadratic equations are quite easy to solve. But when you have this middle term, well, now we need to be thinking in other ways. So the first thing we need to do is to write this equation in standard form. In other words, we're going to set this entire thing equal to 0, and you can say I've done that there. So we're going to have to move all these terms over to the other side. So we'll subtract an m squared from both sides of the equation. We end up with 4m squared, and here we'll add a 3m to both sides of the equation, and we'll end up with a positive 8m, and then here we'll subtract a negative 2 from both sides of the equation, so we'll end up with the negative 2 over here. So now we have this lovely quadratic equation written in standard form. Okay, so what do we do next? Well, here we want to look for opportunities to simplify this, and if you notice, we have a 4, we have an 8, and we have a 2. So you might be saying, you know what, we could factor out a 2 here as the greatest common factor, and you would be correct. So let's just factor out a 2 here. So 2, we could put a 2 parentheses, because if we have this 2 and we distribute back in, we're going to have 2m squared plus 4m minus 1, or 2 times all of this, right? So in other words, when we factor out a 2, we're left with this trinomial. Now, why would we do this? Well, it's just going to make the numbers involved here easier. Now, if you notice, I factored out the GCF, and now I'm able to kind of write the equation this way. 2m squared plus 4m minus 1 is equal to 0. So you might be saying, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, what happened to the 2? You just kind of, got rid of it. Well, not really. What I did was divide both sides of the equation by this 2, okay? So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 0 divided by 2 is 0. So that's a bit of a, I don't want to say a trick, but this is something that you definitely want to do. You want to, make the numbers involved here as easy as possible. So when you have, again, your quadratic equation written in standard form, see if you can factor out, the GCF if it's a number value, and just simplify the numbers involved. Okay, so now we have 2m squared plus 4m minus 1 is equal to 0. How do we solve this quadratic equation? Well, what you want to do is you want to attempt to factor, okay, this quadratic trinomial. Now, Some quadratic trinomials can be factored, others cannot. In this particular case, this cannot be factored. So we're like, okay, well, we can't factor this, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to use the quadratic formula. All right, so again, this is a whole nother subskill of quadratic equations. So let's go ahead and take the next step, which of course is having you quickly subscribe to my YouTube channel before we get into kind of the next phase of this problem. Now, I'm not shy to ask for your help or ask for your support, okay? And you should not be shy either in terms of learning math. If you need help, find the help, okay? Just don't, struggle, like, I don't get this, well, if you don't get something, you could try to help yourself, but typically when it comes to learning math, finding a good math teacher, can really, really just speed up the process instead of you just trying to figure all this stuff out all on your own. Now, for me, I already know that I need your help. I can't figure this out on my own. And the best way to support what I'm trying to do, which of course is reach as many people as possible, is having you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would greatly appreciate that. And if you're going to do that, might as well hit that notification bell as well so you can get my latest videos. If you're new to my channel, I have well over 2,500 videos from basic math to advanced math, like calculus and everything in between. And I like to break things down step by step. Okay, so let's get back to this problem. There is quite a few more steps that we need to take here. All right, so here is our equation. We have 2m squared plus 4m minus 1 is equal to 0. All right, now we already attempted to factor this. Now I'm not showing you that work, but in other words, you're trying to factor this quadratic trinomial, and you're like, you know what, this thing is not factorable, so therefore I have to use the quadratic formula to solve this. Now, to use the quadratic formula, you need to have this thing written in standard form, which means from highest to lowest power, and it's all equal to 0. Now, once this is all in standard form, the coefficients here of these terms are our A, B, and C values. Now, if you don't know how to work with the quadratic formula, well, this will be, probably the first time you've seen it in action, but this is the quadratic formula. It's a huge um, uh, you know, thing that you need to understand, right? I don't know if that's the right word, huge. Well, some of you might be saying, yeah, it is a huge formula. It looks pretty complex. Well, yes, I mean, there is a lot to know here, but it's an extremely important formula. You got to know not only the formula, but how to use it and when to use it. All right, now we're going to use this formula because we can't factor this trinomial, so we have no other choice. So we're going to have to find our A, B, and C values. Now, if you see here, our formula has an A, okay, right there, and there's another A right there. It has B's and it has C. So the A, B, and C values here are the A, B, and C variables we're going to replace with numbers, and those numbers are going to come from this equation. All right, now the number in front of the m squared is our A value. Okay, again, but this is written in standard form, highest to lowest power. So this is A is going to be equal to 2. 2 is the A value. The number in front of the m is going to be our B value. So B is equal to 4. And then that constant number, this number by itself, is going to be our C value. All right, so A is equal to 2, B is equal to 4, and C is equal to -1. So really now what we need to do is plug in all these numbers. We're going to replace these variables with these values, and then we can have one big number crunching operation to do. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Now, as I kind of indicated in the beginning of this problem, there's a lot of you out there that have the right idea. They'll be like, okay, I'm going to multiply all these terms together. I'm going to try to factor this. And if I can't factor this, I'm going to use a quadratic formula to solve. So, it's not like you don't know in the general sense what to do, but it's all the little actual steps that you have to take that really makes the difference in terms of whether you're going to be able to solve this problem. Okay, now here we have our A, B, and C values, and notice that I've plugged in for B, for example, negative B is going to be -4 plus or minus B squared, which is 4 squared, minus 4AC. You can see all these respective number values plugged in for these variables. Now, what you want to do in practice is before you do anything, you have to double, triple check that in fact you plugged in the right numbers. Now, over the decades, I have seen so many students, very good students, just make a simple error by plugging in the wrong number value for a variable. It just, can happen, especially if you lose focus, right? So before you do anything, double, triple check that in fact you have the right numbers plugged in into the quadratic equation. And once you're confident, you're like, okay, now I'm going to focus on simplifying this. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into that right now then. So here we have -4, which of course is going to be -4 plus or minus 4 squared, which is what? 4 squared is 16. Now this part right here tends to confuse this part of the quadratic formula. Actually, this whole thing right in here is called the discriminant. But a lot of errors are made right here because of this minus sign, okay? So the best way to manage this is to take this minus sign and turn it into a plus negative, all right? It's just a great little technique so you could be, kind of fully aware that this is a negative number. Now, it's just a little trick that tends to help a lot of students that make mistakes with the quadratic formula, and a lot of people do. All right, so this is a -4. So we're going to add a -4 times 2 times -1. So we have a negative times a positive, which is negative, times a negative. So this is all going to be what? Positive, right? So negative times a positive is negative, negative times negative is positive. So all this is going to be positive 8. All right, 4 times 2 times 1. So we have 16 plus 8. So we have -4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 8 all over 2 times 2, which of course is 4. All right, so now let's go and continue on. And of course, 16 plus 8 is 24. So we have -4 plus or minus the square root of 24 over 4. Now, if some of you got this answer, I would say that's pretty good, okay? I would say, yes, I would maybe give you a B plus for your work. But this is not fully simplified. In other words, there's a lot we can do here, namely, with this square root and factor out a GCF to kind of clean this all up. So the skills involved here are skills that hopefully you learned in algebra. So the work is not done yet. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. So what we want to recognize is that we want to simplify any perfect square factors in this 24. So we're taking the square root of 24. So the square root of 24 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times 6, and 4 is a perfect square factor. Again, I'm talking about multiple different skills that you need to learn in algebra. So anything that you don't understand, you want to review. What we're talking about here is simplifying radical expressions, all right? So that's what you would want to look up if you're like, I don't understand what you're doing with the square root of 24. Okay, so we have the square root of 24, that's equal to the square root of 4 times 6. So why is that important? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at our answer this way, or take a look at the work this way. We have -4 plus or minus the square root of 24, which is the same thing as the square root of 4 times 6. Now here, I can break up these square roots into two separate square roots. That's a property of square roots. So the square root of 4 times 6 is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 6, and the square root of 4 is what? 2. So this is all equal to 2 square root of 6. So this is where we're at right now. Now, some of you may even have this answer, and that's pretty good. Matter of fact, I might have given you like an A minus for this work, but we're not done yet because notice we have these 4s and 2s here, so we can factor out a GCF, which is 2. All right, so let's factor out a 2 out of all of this. So when we do that, we have 2 times -2 plus or minus the square root of 6. And the way you know that you factored out the GCF right is you just kind of multiply back in and see if you get the right product, right? So 2 times -2 is -4, and then 2 times this plus or minus square root of 6 is 2 square root of 6, all over 4. And 4, of course, you can think of as 2 times 2, because what we want to do here is look at this 2 and think of, hey, is there another 2 in terms of a factor down in the denominator? Of course, we're dealing with the 4, which is the same thing as 2 times 2. So now we could just factor out this 2 with one of the 2's in the 4, and we're left with the following, -2 plus or minus the square root of 6 over 2. So this is the full answer. And actually, got to make sure you know how to interpret this solution. So one of the unique solutions in this quadratic equation is -2 plus the square root of 6 over 2, and the other solution, because remember quadratic equations have two solutions, is -2 minus the square root of 6 over 2. So this is plus, this is minus. So instead of writing the same thing, which is the only difference of plus or minus, we use this lovely notation right here. Okay, so again, as I indicated in the beginning of this video, a lot of people will have the general idea in terms of what to do. They'll be like, all right, I'm going to multiply these together. Then if I have a quadratic equation, I'm going to try to solve it using this technique, using that technique. But here's the deal. If you can't manage all the work, you're not going to be able to solve these equations. That's why it's absolutely critical that you just show your work step by step by step. And you can see a problem like this actually took quite a few steps. You have to have the patience and the focus to, just concentrate on doing this work, right? Especially at this level of math. And again, if you need help with any of the sub skills here, check out like my Algebra 1 or Algebra 2 courses. Also, I have a ton of additional videos on my YouTube channel that can help you out. Okay, so with all that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in all your math adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.